Welcome to Hollywood Insider Help, where you can learn more about how to earn a good living as an author, screenwriter, producer, or podcaster. Remember, you can find great live and on-demand training designed to help you earn a good living making media you love at nancyfultonmeetups.com and nfm24.com. Our host is Nancy Fulton. Let's dive in.
We struggle with trying to find gigs that actually build our careers versus ones that set us back. And sometimes we don't understand how we work collaboratively with other people, what makes us unique and what makes us valuable. The topics that I'm covering in this event are interesting and will serve you, I think, generally in your life. Some are specifically interesting for creative people because we so frequently have to work as collaborators. As creatives, we invest time and effort, ideas, intellectual property, and our reputation really in every single project that we do. And when a project goes great, it becomes a real stepping stone to other great projects. And every time we fail at a project, every time a project fails us because it's mismanaged or we didn't get a chance to do our very best work, they damage us from a wide variety of perspectives. The most successful people in media have the most opportunity to collaborate. They give themselves those opportunities because they are willing to collaborate early on, which puts them in a position to get visibility for their career and give them the kind of opportunities that we all want. They get really good at identifying the right collaborators, the ones that allow them to do their very best work. The famous actors have said, "I will never play a servant." And they've said, "I only want to do character roles where I can show my ability to play a character as opposed to just playing myself all of the time." If we work with the wrong collaborators, they disable us, they distract us, they disaffect us and make us not want to work on the project that we've attached ourselves to, and they take us out of the zone in which we are the most effective. In order for us to find the right collaborators and to give ourselves the opportunities that we deserve to do the kind of work that we're capable of, we need to understand what kind of creatives we are. We need to understand what we do best and what we need to do our best work. And we have to understand where our weaknesses are. We also need to understand how to work with and sometimes sidestep those collaborators with which we are not perfectly matched. Generally speaking, I don't suggest that you have a pen and paper with you when you're attending one of my events. I like to make it so you have the notes and you can pay attention to what we're talking about rather than spending time writing things down. If you happen to have a pen and paper, it could be the case you'll find it interesting to make some notes as we talk about the next couple of slides. Alternatively, when this event is over, maybe you can take a few minutes to look through the slide deck and just go through this little exercise that I'm going to mention right now. I think if you take a look at creative professionals, they have a series of characteristics that sort of goes beyond their basic talent. Like they may be a writer, they may be a screenwriter, they may be an actor, a director. It could be they're a book author. It could be that they're a producer. Beyond that skill, they have other skills that impact their ability and their willingness to collaborate. And if you want to follow along, you can go ahead and make a note next to each of these characteristics based upon how true or not true you feel they are in describing your creative nature. The first thing is artistically driven. If somebody is highly artistically driven, their philosophy generally seems to be, why bother to do anything if you're not going to do it right? They would rather do nothing at all, absolutely nothing at all, than do bad art, because doing bad art is worse than doing nothing at all. And if you were to speak with them, they would say, I have a unique creative voice and I don't want to violate it. Somebody that's really not artistically driven, and there are many people in the entertainment industry who are not artistically driven, their thing is, I just want to get this thing out the door. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Close is good enough for me. I feel strongly that it's more important to have something done than it is to have something that no one can see. We've all I'm sure worked with people that were extremely artistically driven, and we all have some understanding of the challenges that working with that team member can be, because nothing is ever good enough. And sometimes even getting them to start something is hard because they just don't want to get off on the wrong foot. So they won't start because they don't want to make a mistake at the very beginning. Alternatively, we've worked with the opposite. A project gets out the door, but it's not very good. Nobody wants to see it. And it ends up on the media junk pile and turns into a bad credit because it is so unattractive. Collaborative. A collaborative person who's extremely high on the scale would be somebody who says, I really hate it when a creative team is so dysfunctional that nothing gets done. I'm willing to compromise my creative vision or give up creative control in favor of the team's consensus. And I am known as a peacemaker on a project. We've all worked with people who are very collaborative. Many of us really like working with people who are incredibly collaborative. On the other hand, we've all worked with people that are too collaborative in the sense that they're so willing to collaborate that they seem not to have a creative voice of their own, and they're willing to sell out the creative voice of every other person on the project. In a sense, really collaborative people can keep a bad team together when it should fall apart, and it can make it so that a bad team crosses the finish line because it keeps people together. But what they come up with at the end is a waste of time, or may even be something that should never have been created because they ended up being very collaborative with people who break the rules when it comes to copyright, breaks the rules when it comes to employment and paying people, etc. We all know people who are very not collaborative, very actively anti-collaborative. And they're the kind of people who feel very strongly that they need to be respected, that what they have to say has to be respected, and they're totally willing to throw a wrench into the works and sow dismay and dysfunction if they cannot get exactly what they want. They feel like selling out is the worst possible thing that any creative can do. Entrepreneurial. A very entrepreneurial person believes that good media projects covers its costs and makes a profit, and good creative projects make audiences happy. And creative vision for a project is less important than economic viability. So when we talk about people that are artistically driven, we're saying that they care a great deal about the art. Entrepreneurial people, what they define as good art is that which a lot of people like and that which will make a lot of money. So in a sense, you can say that they are as driven and as single-minded as artistically driven people. But very entrepreneurial people just have a different measuring stick. And they do not want to participate in anything that is not going to make money. They're not going to participate in anything that they can't find an audience for. They just don't want to do it. People who are very not entrepreneurial think that it's sick and twisted to think about how much it costs to produce media. It's ridiculous to spend all of your time worrying about what a mythical audience might or might not like, and don't really believe that statistics and research and that kind of stuff is valuable. And believe that creative vision for a project is very important, or sometimes they don't necessarily think creative vision is that important, but they might think collaborating and being part of a team is very important. Or they may think that sometimes they may be very not entrepreneurial because they have a lot of other ways that they want a project to pay off for them. And they may perhaps are the kind of people who like to manipulate folks, or perhaps they like to travel and they want other people to pay for it. It depends. There's a lot of different ways for people to really not care about whether or not a project is financially viable. Some of them are completely artistically driven and team driven, and some of them are just because people don't want to be bothered by trying to make something that's going to be profitable for them or for their investors. Controlling people. Somebody who's highly controlling is somebody who says, I am ready, willing, able to hire, fire, coach, and argue with people in order to control a creative project. We've all met these people. Especially if you're a producer, if you hire 50 people on a project, you're going to get one or two people that are very controlling, and you're going to spend the rest of your time fighting for them over control of the project. Sometimes you're fighting over control of the whole project. Sometimes they just are really very strongly assertive about the particular portion of it that they're involved in. And they just really feel very strongly that they have a right to control other people that work for them. Sometimes it can be just shocking. We're all familiar with directors and producers and editors who say, I don't want you talking to my clients. I've hired you, you're working on my team. I never want you to talk to anybody else on the team. I do not want you to speak for this group, or I don't want you to talk about my work or our work. It's basically you live in a cone of silence, because these people are very controlling and want to control every single thing that comes out about them and about their work. And that means they're going to have to control whatever people are involved in their work process. These folks sometimes, if they're highly controlling, feel very strongly that creating media to sell is an inherently non-democratic process. Somebody's got to be in charge, and all other things being equal, it's going to be them. They do not believe that all voices are of equal value, and they believe that weak leaders who cannot control their team should be replaced, and they are often willing to step into that role. People who are not controlling let people walk all over them and are happy to give up control, happy to follow the strongest leader, happy to switch from one person to another. They just don't have a desire to build a kingdom. They're not empire builders. It can be because they're very collaborative. It can be also because they just don't enjoy fighting. It can be because they're really good at just paying attention to their work and ignoring everything else. But they are the opposite of controlling. Independent people will say, I'll walk away from a creative project if I'm not having a good time. Life is really short, and spending time doing stuff I hate is a waste of time. And I can always find someone else or something else to work with or work on, and some other group of people that want to support me in my work. Given gig isn't working out, I'm totally willing to walk off the set or walk out of the project. We've all worked with highly independent people. They always have one foot out the door. And we've also worked with people who are not independent at all, and who honestly just can't imagine what the world would be like if a given project or a given job goes away. They don't want to be autonomous in seeking out new work or aggressively looking for new opportunities. They're just not up for that at all. Highly risk averse is somebody who avoids any kind of conflict in their creative work. They will literally not do anything if it means that they'll have to argue with people, fight with people, struggle. And more importantly, if it's going to put their financial future at risk. So if they have a book, they're the kind of people who will not publish it because they don't want to take the risk that it won't make money, that it will fail, that people won't like it, that they might get bad reviews. They're just not going to put it out there. These are actors who don't want to go on auditions. These are producers that don't want to take the risk of producing by raising money or by funding their projects or by creating content for free and then putting it out there. If they can fail, they do not want to be involved. They don't want to create ties, have people be able to make any kind of claim on their time or their art or any aspect of their work life. They want to protect their reputation from being damaged. And they only like working with people when it's easy and organic and when there's no risk and no possible downside. So they may enjoy singing in a choir, a church choir or a city choir, or they might enjoy events at school where the downside is very limited. Even though they might have been great in those kinds of environments and very creative, they do not want to be a professional where much. People who are risk-friendly, shall we call them, are happy to take risks. They say, if you want something, go for it. If you don't take a risk, you're never going to succeed. You have to if you don't play, you can't win. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. They feel very strongly that risk-taking is the only way anyone is ever successful. And in fact, a lot of times they'll take more risks than they need to take. When it would be easy for them to do a project that is $100,000, they'll do a project that's $5 million. When it would be easy to do a micro-budget film, they will instead choose to do a 90-minute feature that is set in a foreign country. And in many cases, they're not just taking risks for themselves, they're willing to take their crew and other people on the risk with them because they believe one way or another things are going to work out and that the biggest risk is not doing anything at all. So if you take a look at these items and you rate yourself from 1 to 5, but which is most true about you, you'll start to get a picture of at least how you believe you are creative. And you can see how some of these characteristics might very well put you at odds with others who have exactly the opposite characteristic. If somebody is not very artistically driven, doing something's better than doing nothing. An artistically driven person will struggle with that. But I have a unique creative voice and don't want to violate it. They're probably going to do okay with other people that are reasonably artistically driven. They're probably not going to do well with people who are not, or people who are not artistically driven at all, right? They're in the middle of the road, so they might do better if they were hanging out with other people that are middle of the road. At least the team that they are on would get something done. It might be the case that if you were making points, you might go ahead and say, I'm collaborative. I do strongly feel that I hate it when a creative team is so dysfunctional that nothing gets done. I actually really do hate that. I am willing to compromise my creative vision or give up creative control in favor of a team consensus. Yeah, kind of. I am known as a peacemaker on a project. So if you go ahead and you do this for all of these things and you take a good look at how you score, you'll get a sense of what's really important for you. For example, this particular person who scored this, they're highly entrepreneurial, they're very controlling, they're very independent. So those characteristics represent, in a sense, their general approach to being creative. And they also identify pretty clearly that they are not people that should be working with folks who are extremely artistically driven, right? Because that person that's extremely artistically driven is going to be really stuck on trying to get something perfect out the door. Somebody that they're not going to do too well with people who are risk averse, because those people are going to be really focused on trying not to put themselves or any of their property at work. They're probably not going to be too good at working with people who are overly collaborative, because these folks are independent and they might do well if the collaborative people are always on their side and always being supportive of them. But if the collaborative people say, hey, why don't you sell out and just do what we want? This guy's more ready to walk out the door than other folks. So what I'd suggest is you consider rating yourself on the scale, and maybe you can think of other characteristics that are relevant that you've noticed. You might phrase things differently. You might think of things slightly differently. Then I would suggest that you think back to past situations where things have not gone particularly well, and perhaps the people that made it difficult for you to work and get your work done and have a successful conclusion to your project, or people who destroyed a project that you worked on, and rate those people, in your opinion, based upon these characteristics. And I think if you do that, you'll quickly realize where the mismatch was. And you will also get a sense of people and the specific characteristics that you really don't want to work with. Alternatively, if you think about projects that have gone really well and working relationships that you really enjoyed, and you rate the people that you worked with, especially the most important people you feel on that project, you will be able to identify the characteristics that are most important to you and most useful to you in getting your best work out the door and getting you the accolades of reputation, the credits and so forth that you care the most about. And so that exercise, I think, is valuable because it talks specifically about your creative personality. But now I want to talk briefly about a more generalized approach to personality. And I specifically want to talk about a tool that's used worldwide by government employers, huge companies, small businesses, tech companies, and so forth. And it's called the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. I will admit that this is a fairly old test. It's been somewhat discredited for a couple of specific reasons. For one thing, When you're young and you take this test and evaluate your personality based upon the metrics that it describes, your personality, quote unquote, will change from when you're young versus when you're older. And so some people say it's not really describing your personality, because generally speaking, we don't believe that personality changes over time. Although I would say actually it does. I think people are different when they're younger. Maturity does change their personality on a fundamental level, but that's a personal belief. The second problem with the Myers-Briggs personality tests and profiles is that some people say that it should never be used to forecast what kind of position someone should have. So if you do some Googling about Myers-Briggs personality testing, you'll see that some personalities are supposedly best suited to being teachers, some are best suited to being owning businesses, some are best suited to being police officers or military folks. This test is used so widely in academic, government, and employment situations that people feel it has an untoward impact on the lives of real life living, working people, and sometimes tells them that they are, quote unquote, unsuited based upon their personality to do well in a particular position. I think using it in the context that I'm going to talk about it right now is valuable and important for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not suggesting that you use it to forecast how successful you're going to be or how successful the people that you're working with are going to be. And second, I'm not suggesting somebody's good or bad, or whether or not they are suited for a particular position or to be worked with in any capacity. That's not really my point about referencing this particular tool. I think it's an easy way for you to get a sense of where you and someone else might or might not fit on some really fundamental levels. It's an inventory of 70 questions. It scores you on several specific characteristics, and then you use those characteristics to sort of determine your type. And if you Google the type that it assigns you, you would find out whether or not you agreed with their description of you and the description of the kinds of things that you enjoy versus the kind of things that you don't, and the kinds of conflicts that you tend to have versus the kind of conflicts you never have. I think it's useful from that perspective. You get ranked or rated based on introversion or extroversion, sensing or intuition, thinking or feeling, judging or perceiving. And you end up with one letter from each category. And you might, for example, be ISTP, which is to say introverted, sensing, thinking, and perceiving. Or you might be an ENFJ, extroverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. And those two types, if you read the descriptions of those two types, are radically different from one another. And at least in my experience, when somebody really is in a wildly different type, is separate, as completely different as an ISTP is from an ENFJ, they do tend to struggle because they, honest to God, their personalities seem to clash. I think these results really do help to predict the kind of conflicts that people are likely to have. Knowing this can help you figure out how to sidestep problems and how to find a route to communicate that works with most people based upon their personality type. I also think you can learn, once you start experimenting with the MBTI, you can get a sense by talking to people and listening to people what their characteristics might be, and you can use that information to resolve problems going forward. There's a link here to the 16 personalities free personality test. Give that a shot. There are other psychology tests at Psychology Today. They have a whole bunch of them. I don't think it's ever a bad idea to goof around with testing tools, mostly because they help you think about personality and they help you assess where some strengths might be, where some weaknesses might be. It's not the kind of thing that you should take as a judgment, and you don't even really have to believe what it says. Some tests I think are a complete waste of time. They're so fuzzy-minded that they're useless and distracting rather than informative. But I think the exercise of playing around with these tests helps you think about your nature in a way that you might not otherwise do. So I want to talk for a few minutes about the Myers-Briggs personality profile, how it works, and give you some insight into how it might be able to help you solve problems when you're in a collaborative environment and you can't just you can't just get rid of the person that's causing you trouble, or when and they can't get rid of you. And you really do have to find a way to work together in some effective way. So people with the ENFJ MBTI type are extroverted, which means they derive their value and their energy from people. Extroverted people, when they want to relax, generally speaking, they'll go home and they'll hang out with their family, or they'll go home and they'll hang out with friends. That's how they feel relaxed. It doesn't have to be that you like a rip-roaring party all the time. It could just be that, generally speaking, you'd rather hang out with one or two or three other people than be entirely alone. If somebody's really introverted, on the other hand, when they've had a really long day, or they've been put under stress and they need to regroup and relax, they tend to be the kind of people who want to shut themselves up with a book. They want to read, they want to watch television. They really need that alone time in order to recover and relax. Intuitive people, which uses the N, capitalizes the N for intuitive, perceives the world through an abstraction of rules and principles that they have derived, instead of seeing the world primarily through their senses. So I happen to be really high on the N, and which is to say that my way of solving is I sit there and I compare things. I try to figure out what the rules are, and I try to understand how things work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not the case that I pay attention to my senses. I really am not attuned to my senses. And I think that's true for a lot of people that fall into this category. When they go on a vacation, they're not thinking about spending time in the pool. They're not the kind of people that generally want to work out all the time. They're the kind of people that want to go to a museum. Paying attention to their physical bodies tends to be a distraction to them. They're just ivory towerish people. When people say, and I use me as an example because I am extremely high on that particular parameter. Feeling, driven by their feelings and value adjustments rather than what would be tactically or smart or factually based. I just feel that it's wrong and I'm just not going to have anything to do with it. Even when it would be in their best interest, they just get pig-headed about it, and that's just how they feel about it. They are not going to, they're not going to do something even though it would be in their best interest and the best interest of other people. Right is right, wrong is wrong, rules are rules. That's just how it is. And that's different from people who are very tactically oriented. A tactical person will say, look, if it's going to make it so that I don't have to talk about this anymore, I will absolutely tell a lie. Anything to get me out of this room. People lie all the time. This is going to be one of the times I lie. Let's move on. Feeling versus thinking, they're just two halves of the same coin. And the feeling folks tend to be whatever they've decided right is, even if the rest of the world thinks it's entirely wrong, they're going to be governed by that gut instinct over and over again. Whereas thinking people, they will change and go, I will change my behavior to tactically in order to get what I want. I will think things through. That's what matters most to me, not just my gut instinct. I don't even have that gut instinct craziness. Judging means prefer to make plans and formal decisions rather than playing things by ear, and making decisions only as driven by events. When people are judging, they honestly can be paralyzed if they're not given the opportunity to make a plan. They cannot just get into the room and make things happen. It makes them freeze up. If they get put in that position, it makes them almost completely incapable of moving forward because they don't have the opportunity to figure out what they're going to do and make a formal decision and then move forward 1, 2, 3, 4. Whereas somebody who is on the opposite side of that scale they can respond really well in the moment. Sometimes, in fact, they will try to delay a decision for a really long time until the absolute last possible moment, because they're constantly waiting to see if a better situation's come up in order for them to make a choice or move forward. Classically speaking, an ENFJ usually does well as a teacher or a director or something like that. They tend to be very people-oriented. They're the kind of people that enjoy spending time with people, teaching, solving problems, etc. They tend to believe very strongly in right and wrong. They've got that moral edge, and they're always happy when they can do something that's moral. And they do like to make plans. They're schemers, so to speak. If we now take a look at the next personality profile, an ISTJ is somebody who's introverted, sensing, thinking, and judging. So these people are drained by their social interactions because they're introverted. They see the world through what they can sense directly, what's concrete, what's easy to prove. So they're not the kind of people that get off on, you can tell them if A then B then C, look where you'll be then. And they'll be like, listen, I just care about what's happening in the here and now. I'm not going to be worried about all that other stuff. And they live very much in their bodies, in the here, in the now, and they're very focused on the here and the now and what's real. And they just are not going to be distracted by abstractions. They may be somebody who's a thinking person, is driven to value logic, what's tactically in their best interest, not necessarily governed by the whole whatever they feel to be right and wrong, not willing to apply that to other people so much as just practically, what do I have to do to get what I want? And this particular person is judging. What's interesting is when an ISJ and an ENFJ have to work together, that they can work together on judging. Generally speaking, we have to have a plan and we have to execute it. Why? Because they both feel strongly on the judging scale. So even if they can't agree on any other thing, they will definitely agree there has to be a plan. If either one of them was the kind of person that had P for that last thing, if it was like an ISTP and an ENFJ, or for example, that would be trouble. If somebody's an ISTJ and they have to work with an ENFP, there's literally, it's oil and water. They don't agree about anything. On a personality standpoint, the way they operate in the world is so diametrically opposed that it's almost impossible for them to function. And so a lot of times, anytime these guys are teamed up or have to work together, unless there's a lot of other people in the way, they're really going to struggle. Because, for example, the ENFJ is going to think, abstraction is everything, and gut instinct and rules are everything, is right and wrong is wrong. And you don't even want to talk about it. You don't even want to hang out and discuss it. It's like, and the ISTJ goes, that's exactly right. I don't want to discuss it. I think all of your crazy instincts or your crazy abstractions are a waste of my time. And your sense of right and wrong means absolutely nothing to me. So I don't want to have anything to do with you. And if they don't even have judging to work on together, then they don't have a way. There's just no communication channel. It's very hard for them to work together, and it can be almost impossible. What I'm recommending that you consider doing, and you don't have to do it, but you may find it interesting, is that perhaps you should take the Myers-Briggs personality profile, figure out what kind of folk you are, and then start looking around at the people that you enjoy hanging out with and getting a sense of where you think they might fall on these characteristics. And I bet you find that you have a particular affinity for certain kinds of people. And it will be specifically because they match up with you from certain perspectives. And they do say that opposites attract. It is true that many couples, one of them will be the extrovert, the other one will be the introvert. And it's often the case that they will have a characteristic in common. For example, they might be both very high on the N, and they might be very high on the J, but they will have characteristics that make them mesh together, and then they will have other characteristics that make them very different, but will also make it so that they're more effective as a team, because what one person can't handle, the other one is absolutely great at. So I think you'll find the Myers-Briggs personality profile a really interesting exercise. It doesn't take very much time or effort for you to learn more about these tests and to take them. You can find them available free. I'm not recommending that you use them to guide your life. I'm just adding them to your arsenal of tools that you can use when you're trying to figure out why a relationship or a collaboration isn't working, or what to do when you really can't communicate with someone and you really want to. I think you should spend time studying those you work with. Think about how would they answer the creative questions. Think about how they would answer the MBTI questions. When you go ahead and take the test, you'll find out what those questions are. Think about what people who you're working with on a given project, or in the past or currently or in the future that you're planning to work on, what do they want to achieve in that project, and what do they want to do with their career generally? So how do their overall plans fit in with what you want to actually do? Pay attention to people and see, what do they actually come into conflict with people over? Is it the case that they have artistic differences, that they're willing to draw a line on artistic things, and if their voice isn't heard, they're willing to walk out the door? And also pay attention to how they try to resolve those conflicts. Do they try to talk them out, or do they walk away and say, I need to cool down, or I'm going to just try to go around you, I'm just going to try to control you? How do they try to solve those problems? And pay attention to how they refresh themselves and revive themselves. Some people are the kind of people that want to socialize and hang out with people. They can't wait to get to the weekend, because that's when they get to hang out with their friends. They go out for a drink, they go out for dinner, they spend the whole weekend hopefully engaged in those kind of activities. And some people they cannot wait to go home, close the door, sit down with a book, TV, Netflix, and chill, read something, write something. They spend the whole weekend trying to recover quietly. Knowing the difference between these kinds of creators can make a huge difference to understanding yourself and also understanding the people that you want to work with. And it can also be helpful in making sure that you can see exactly where things are broken. A lot of times we apply the kinds of things that we learned when we were in grade school. Be nice, be fair. Those things don't actually solve problems, right? The older you get and the more complex the project gets, the more it has to be, do our interests work together? Do our creative capacities work together? Is everybody able to bring their best work forward? These are the things that should be determining how we move forward on our projects, how we solve problems, how we choose who to work with. The next thing I want to talk about is that creatives actually don't do a good enough job of really leveraging their strengths. I think as we age, we probably get more aware than most people of the difference between who someone is and who they think they are. We all have friends who think that they are really easygoing, really friendly, and very generous, and yet we know them personally, and they're not really any of those things. That's not really all that surprising. When you're born into a family, your mother and your father, I wouldn't say you're a blank slate, but they don't know who you are, and they start projecting things onto you from a really early age. And it takes a lot of us a long time to figure out that we're not really the people that our parents told us we were. We thought we were, and we went along with it because they kept saying it, but really in real life, we're not like that. And like, people would tell us, you're shy, and you're like, I'm not shy. I'm grown up, I'm totally not shy. I don't know why they kept telling me I was shy when I was little, because I'm totally not shy. So we're very cognizant of those things, and we get more cognizant probably than most people as a part and party of the content that we create and the art that we do on a regular basis. And the more we work, the more exposed we are to confronting our weaknesses. We have to do it pretty routinely. If you're an actor, you repeatedly find yourself in situations where there are better actors and worse actors. So you get a sense of where you are in terms of your ability to be able to create great characters very quickly that make people very interested in watching you. Or if you're a writer, how quickly you can write, how well you can write based upon how people respond to your work, etc. You get a sense of your strengths and your weaknesses from that standpoint. What we don't really do often enough is consciously, vigorously assess our strengths and choose to build on them. And often, I think we don't focus on the fact that a lot of times our weaknesses are our strengths in disguise. Sometimes, if we survive in an industry long enough, we start to recognize in other people that their weaknesses are actually their strengths. I've had a strange set of experiences where I've had to work with a variety of different people who do editing. Amazing editors often are really nitpicking and abrasive perfectionists who will go any length to get a video or a sound or a text absolutely right. They really care, and they will go to the wall. Like, a dangling participle is absolutely the worst possible thing that can happen to a given sentence. They really care about these things, and they can be really hell to work with because they do care a great deal about them. But on the other hand, it's also what makes them amazing. Good directors. A good director, they can talk you into anything. It's ridiculous. They're so aggressively persuasive and effectively manipulative. They're so good at getting creatives to deliver exactly what they want that it is truly terrifying. And in fact, if you take a look at some of the really great directors of the past, Hitchcock, etc., if you take a look at some of these guys who have gained reputations for being absolutely the best possible directors in the world, they will stop at nothing. They will literally stop at nothing. They can get you to sign on to the project. They can manipulate you so you take the role that they want you to have, and when all is said and done, they'll get you to portray exactly the character that they wanted you to portray. And sometimes it is terrifying to see the lengths that they will go to. And I don't necessarily approve of that at all. But the point is that when it comes to what appears on the screen, you can't argue with the fact that the content that they create is riveting, and that is what good directors, quote unquote, are paid for. Many profitable indie producers are determined and gregarious, high-stakes gamblers. I've met many indie producers and ones that levitate out of the pack and work on bigger and bigger projects over time and get more and more money over time. They are, to my mind, they're high-stakes gamblers. They will take risks I would never take. They are the kind of people who will put their house on the line, which is entirely the wrong thing to do. The guy who made Apocalypse Now, he mortgaged his house in order to finish making that film. If you take a look at the most successful indie producers, they have taken risks that you would never take, and they've done it comfortably and done it happily. And a lot of times they failed, and then they've just sprung right back up again because they are unstoppable. So you meet these people and you think, I'm never going to work with you because you're crazy and you take these risks I would never take. And it's, yeah, because that's what works for them. That is what works. And it may make them not work with you, but there's going to be other people who do work with them because they don't mind the high stakes gambling, and it will let them attempt more frightening projects. And then because they're in the project, go ahead and decide to make it come off. Pair a really good, profitable indie with a really great indie director and an amazing editor. You start to put together these really crazy people, and they make an insanely great team. Many great actors are so great at capturing attention and creating dramatic moments that you literally cannot take your eyes off them. And I've only had the opportunity to work with a few, but it's like shocking, literally shocking. The second they walk in the room, it's like, it's more than the world lights up. They make everybody in the room perk up and become more attentive. They create a kind of electricity. I guess that's what you mean by personal magnetism. And it is shocking how they can galvanize creatives. And it is reason, I think, why a lot of projects are built around a great actor or one or more great actors, is because they do more than just bring a great character to the screen. They bring something magical to a set. As normal people, relatively speaking, and maybe people relatively new to making media, most of us tend to take gigs where we don't use our awkward characteristics to our maximum advantage. We don't say, hey, I'm a detail person, and I'm just going to go pick jobs that require me to be obsessed. Or I'm an actor, so I'm going to work on projects where I can be the center of attention, and I'm going to deliver my roles so well they stop traffic. And as a writer, we don't say, yeah, okay, I'm neurotic and I'm obsessive and I'm brooding and I see a story around every corner on every face, and I'm just going to take gigs where the folks love that. And I'm not saying that you have to be a freak to be successful, but I think a lot of us spend way too much time feeling bad because we don't actually fit in. We feel like we don't fit in, and that means that we're broken. When the characteristic that causes us the most discomfort is actually what sets us apart and what can set us above. And maybe we should go with that and try to figure out how to use that to our maximum advantage instead of trying to rub off the sharp edges and get along with everybody all the time. So now let's talk about networking. When you have a really good grip on your personality through one or more personality tests, and you really take the time to look hard at your strengths and your weaknesses creatively, then it's really hard. Then it's time to really think hard about who you should be hanging out with and who you should be working with. Quite frankly, it's possible for most of us to get along with anyone, but that's really not what it takes to thrive as a creative making it in Hollywood. It's just not, that is not the point of the activity. You really need to look for people who are perfect fits. For a writer, this might be an actor who can play all the roles that you care the most about. I don't know if you've ever taken a look at Richard Dreyfuss and Steven Spielberg, but they work together over and over again. And in effect, Richard Dreyfuss was like Steven Spielberg's alter ego. And once they started working together, they didn't stop working together because Richard Dreyfuss was the perfect everyman to appear in all the stories that Spielberg wanted to tell, at least a huge number of them. The writer that makes an actor look amazing, the actor that elevates a script into something that wins hearts and minds, up-and-coming directors who collect up-and-coming actors and new producers who collect new writers who share their love for a particular kind of story can really make magic happen on a dime. There's a million different places to meet people. We meet people all of the time. Most of us are circulating every single weekend. And right now, because we're having hot and cold strikes, we're in a position to do a lot more socializing than we might otherwise do. Meetup, Eventbrite, film and theater events at universities, the Fringe Festival, film festivals, classes, workshops. These are all great places for you can meet people. And most of the people that you're going to meet there are people who want to meet you. They're in a position to be there. A lot of these folks are networking just like you're networking. But I think the important thing is not to just go to the events, but to keep your eyes open for the kind of people who will fit you well. As a writer, when you see an actor that's amazing, step up and tell him and offer to send him a script. Rich and famous actors, they don't want to hear about your script. Actors that are just coming up, they sure do, because they're looking for opportunities. And if they can find a good property to be a part of, that creates a real opportunity to them. As a producer, when you see an amazing indie film, find whoever made it rock. Was it the writer, the actor, director, designer? Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a producer and I just wanted to let you know I'm an indie producer. I'm new, but that was an amazing project right there. And get to know them and to see whether or not there's a fit for you from a creative standpoint and from a Myers-Briggs personality standpoint. Because if you can gather a crew of 10, 20, 30, 40 people that you really are a good fit for, you can create your own opportunities. You're looking for personalities and creative aptitudes that you know for a fact you work well with. And if you invest kind words and interest and support early and often with these up-and-comers, they become part of your network, part of your creative tribe. And one day, I think they can become part of your profitable projects. That's how you actually come up in the entertainment industry collaboratively. It's not just by talking to anybody, doing business with anyone, taking any opportunity. It's being really good at knowing what you need and who you need to work with in order to do your very best work and who you can help to do their very best work. Ultimately, your success really depends on your ability to get what you want from a personal and a career standpoint. It does require you as a creative to collaborate. And in order to do that, you need to understand your emotional needs and your work requirements and to identify the people that you can and cannot work well with. There are a lot of projects to choose from in this town, and there's a lot of different ways that you can elect to work with people. Know who you are, know what you're good at, what you are bad at, what you need, and actively look for where you truly fit in. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up to the top of the screen and check to see if there's any questions. Cool. The first one is from Sandra, who mentioned back a while ago that she thought the Myers-Briggs personality profile had been discredited. I think if you look at the research, that the specific reasons it was discredited don't necessarily really apply here. It was discredited because it is not a necessarily good forecaster for telling you who is going to succeed and who is not going to succeed. It should not be used that way, in my opinion. I think what it may be useful for is helping people understand the channels on which it is easiest for them to communicate. If, for example, you have to work with somebody and it's clear that from talking to them and in doing business with them that they really don't find abstraction useful. That means it's probably not going to work for you to bring in 15 articles that support your point. It's probably not going to be so useful for you to draw 32 diagrams on a whiteboard explaining your point of view. What is, you have to find another channel to communicate on. And it could be the case that you can get them to move forward with you because you say, look, this may be awkward. It may not be a good, you may not necessarily want to do this, but it's the right thing to do. And I know that you care a lot about right and wrong. So we should move forward to do this thing that I'm recommending because it's the right thing to do. Not because of any other reason, but because it's the right thing to do. And if they've got the feeling characteristic in the Myers-Briggs personality profile, and they really do believe it's the right thing to do, they will do it, even though they don't want to necessarily, even though it's not in their best interest, they'll do it because that's the nature of that characteristic. The next question is, are there any places you'd recommend that I network? There's a lot of different places to network. It's hard to find places necessarily where people are willing to open up their minds and their time and kind of their social calendars to hang out with you. I do think classes work from that perspective. Sometimes courses that you take at UCLA, courses that you take at USC, seminars that you take can be good places for you to find new contacts because people that are in those locations are obviously investing time in creating new connections. So if I had to pick a place that would be a good investment of time while we're waiting for the strikes to be over and our time to move forward again, I think I would recommend strongly that you actually take classes. Classes are better than classes that are, especially ones if you can meet face to face, or if you can work with people, if they're online, if they have several meetings and they're back to back over the course of 5 to 6 weeks, maybe writing a screenplay or retreat groups or something, that can be worthwhile. But you really do have to put the time in. And they have to have enough people so that it's worth your while. I think that is why a lot of people go to the UCLA classes, and I think it's specifically for that reason, actually. Let's see. So somebody says, as an indie producer hiring important people for the first time, should you give them Myers-Briggs personality profile? I think you might find out that's illegal. I suspect there's a book that called Speed Reading People. And if you read it, it's on Amazon. And if you read there's probably more than one, but if you find the one that references how to speed read people using Myers-Briggs, it teaches you how to talk to people and figure out where they fall on the Myers-Briggs personality profile well enough to get a sense of the basics. And the more you talk to them, the more you talk to people, the better you get to know them, the clearer their type will likely be. And at least in my opinion, if I really am struggling with somebody, I'll actually go find the Myers-Briggs personality profile, and I'll sit there and I'll try to answer the questions like them based upon what I know of them. And I'll get a good sense of at least my opinion of them. Maybe it's not accurate, but at least I'll usually come up with a pretty good sense of why I think we can't communicate and what channels we can't communicate on. I would also point out this, and it's interesting. So when you get a chance, Google Myers-Briggs personality profile stress. Let's say that somebody is an ENFJ and you apply stress to them. What will happen is the more stress you apply, the less ENFJ they will become. And that makes sense if you think about it. If I'm an ENFJ and I'm a happy, content person going through the world, being an ENFJ is working out pretty well for me. If something bad happens to me, I'm put under stress and my ENFJ personality profile isn't working for me, then I'm going to stop being an ENFJ. First thing is I might become more withdrawn and less extroverted, right? And it could be the case that I might normally be interested in abstractions and discussions and problem solving, but if you apply enough stress, what will happen if I'm an ENFJ? is I'll become very focused on the here and now and how I feel. I'm hot, I'm tired, I'm hungry. Like I'll focus very much on the here and now and not care about the abstractions anymore. If I am a feeling person and I get put under way too much stress, I'm going to flip over to the other side and I'm going to become very tactical. My point is this: when people are put under a lot of stress, their natural inclination is actually to fade over to the opposite side on those four characteristics. And you know what? We notice that. You've noticed that in the past. You've seen somebody who's always acted a certain particular way, and then you've seen their character totally change, and you said, hey, something's up with that guy. He's not acting like he normally acts. You recognize that his personality has changed, and you have a sense that he's under stress. The kind of person who normally is very introverted, when you put them under enough stress, they become very talkative. And all of a sudden they don't express their feelings, and then next you put them under enough stress and they flip over to shouting all of the time. Whereas somebody who's very extroverted, when you put them under stress, they flip over and they become very quiet. And that's how you know you're really in trouble. When the extroverts become very quiet, when the introverts become very noisy, those are indications to you that they're under a lot of stress. So the Myers-Briggs personality profile, the more you look into it, the more interesting things it has to say. Again, I don't think you should live your life based upon it. It's just a lens through which you can look at the world. And I don't think you should use it to forecast whether or not someone should get a job or how much they should make or where they should work. I'm sure that there's INTJ producers and there's ENFJ producers. I'm sure there's a place for every kind of person in every job. But what I'm saying is, in terms of how you can work, in terms of whether or not you can work with them, I think you can say my personality is mostly this. And I think I'm usually going to do better with people that I can communicate at least on some channel. Robert says, I heard the SAG actors can sign for work with an indie producer. SAG actors who want to work with an indie producer on a truly independent project should contact the union to find out if they have permission. And the chances are good that the indie producer will have to sign the indie contract. But yeah, the objective of the unions, as my understanding, is that they are trying to punish the members of the the American Motion Picture Television Production Organization, which is the hugest producers, all of the big producers in Hollywood, not necessarily the mom and pop micro producers. That said, SAG actors who cross the picket line working for anybody without permission of the union are making a huge mistake. So I can't tell. SAG actors have to go to the union and ask permission to, whether or not and what would be required for them to work on a particular production. It could be the case that if you're a producer and you want to work with a SAG actor, you could contact the union and say, hey, I'm willing to sign whatever piece of paper you got. Tell me how I can work with your actors. I hear that the union did just allow some productions to go forward recently, and they call them truly independent productions. So contact the union if you want to know more about that. Nobody can answer any questions about the strike except SAG-AFTRA and the WGA. That's just a fact. All right. I had a really great time hanging out with you this evening, and I hope this is useful to you. I think that I look forward to seeing all of your work, and I hope you do send it to me and tell me about the projects that you're working on, the projects you wish you were working on. Do continue to be creative. I think it's a waste. If you don't, you're making terrible use of what could be a really important time. So don't let this time go by without writing a book or working on a one-man show or trying to figure out how you can do audiobooks or whatever it is you want to do that's your own stuff that you can create. You have the right to remain creative and to work with the kind of people that you want to work with and to do the kind of work you care the most about. That's what makes life worth living, I think, for most of us. All right. Can't wait to talk to you next week, and do reach out if I can be of service to you.
Thanks for listening to the Hollywood Insider Podcast. If you have questions you'd like answered, guests you would like to suggest, or topics you'd like us to cover, please email Nancy at nancyfultonmeetups.com. If you like what you hear, please click to follow the podcast and give us a kind word in the comments. If you find our thoughts and suggestions help you, please share our podcast with other creators who need help. We love being of service to creative minds. This podcast is produced by No Better Friend Entertainment, and this audio recording was copyrighted in 2024. All rights reserved. Music for this episode is licensed for commercial use from pond5.com.